this is my podcast, Smitten with Knittin'. I come to you from New Bedford, Massachusetts, where I live with my husband, Robert, and our pug, Watson. And this podcast is about knitting, the fiber arts, and the fiber arts community. Some of my finds throughout my journeys as a knitter, as well as recent discoveries just through being in social networks and social media. So if this is your first time joining me, thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy the podcast and that you'll click subscribe underneath the video itself in YouTube. And if you're returning, thanks so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to bringing you more of these episodes and more of my finds and projects. So today I have a lot to share. I think it's been about 3 or 4 weeks since I last podcasted. Life has been really full, so I apologize for the delay, but my hope is that today I can kind of bring the community up to speed on where I'm at and share with you a lot of the projects that I've been working on and also some of my newest finds. For those of you who are returning, you may have seen previous episodes. I've kind of moved locations around my house to try to find the best fit. I think from now on I'm going to be here in my craft room. It seems to be the quietest space, has the best lighting, and I think will just be a good fit. So thanks for your patience if you've watched other episodes and noticed that I've sort of moved around a little bit. I'm also trying to find the technology that's going to be the best fit. I have a laptop, but unfortunately when I record with it, it's a little bit older. The camera quality isn't as good, and when I upload it to the video software, it delays my movements with the audio. So right now I'm trying on an iPad that my husband and I have to see if this will work. My hope is that it will, but it's a bit more of a recent purchase. So I think the quality of the camera, the technology behind it, etc. is better. So I think at this point, enough blubbering about me, and let's jump right into talking about the yarn and the knitting that's been going on here in my life. So actually, before I begin that, I am jumping ahead of myself, and I apologize for that. I do have some exciting news. Through my own podcast viewing, The Grocery Girls Knit, Diary of a Yarn Snob, I've come across Sam from Hand Me My Knitting. Sam posted an episode not too long ago, and in it she mentions in her own personal life she's been watching the TV show Parks and Recreation. So I immediately commented at the end of the podcast to say, you know, it's one of my favorite shows. My husband and I really enjoy it. We just found it kind of a nice breather from the day-to-day reality that we have. So Sam and I exchanged some conversation and moved our conversation over to Ravelry, and we decided we're going to co-host a knit-along. So the knit-along is going to be a treat yourself in the spirit of Parks and Recreation. If you aren't familiar with it, I encourage you to watch it. Where you are going to be essentially treating yourself. Maybe it's a fiber that's been in your stash that you've been eager to cast on. Maybe you want to go out to your local yarn store and purchase something to get started with. Maybe there's a pattern you've just been dying to jump into. So that's the spirit of the treat yourself. There will be an opportunity to gain yourself multiple entries if you keep it within the theme of Parks and Recreation. So, for example, one of the characters, Leslie Knope, loves waffles. Maybe you use a waffle stitch in something that you are knitting, or maybe you found a colorway that is named bacon. Ron Swanson, one of the characters, really enjoys bacon. So if you find something that's thematic along with the show in the spirit of treat yourself, then certainly that's multiple entries. So Sam is going to put on her Ravelry page a thread to talk, a chatter thread to talk about the podcast, or not the podcast, excuse me, the knit along. And I will do the same, and then we'll also have a finished objects thread on each of our pages, and then we'll draw winners. Sam is from, I believe, she's from Canada. I want to say she's just outside of Vancouver, if I remember correctly from her own podcasts. So it's sort of a span across the continental U.S. and Canada, greater North America, but it's just another example of why I love the fiber community. I would not have been part of this or engaged in that conversation if it weren't for just the wonderful, lovely people that I've met. So I'm really looking forward to doing that with Sam. The knit along will begin July 1st and run through the end of August, so I believe August 31st. There's 31 days in August, I think. Yeah. So anyways, there'll be more details up on my Ravelry page, so I really encourage you to check that out. I am on Ravelry as MissKnitSea. That's my own personal account, but the group that I started is a Smitten with Knitting podcast group. So head on over there, check it out, and join us and engage in some of the conversation that's been going on there as well. And in the spirit of a Parks and Recreation knit-along, I have my Be the Leslie Knope in Whatever You Do mug, courtesy of my husband, Robert. So I apologize. As I try this new technology, I'm finding that sometimes I can reverse the image and sometimes I cannot. So I apologize, but hopefully everything's clear that I do show you that's related to yarn and fiber today. And it certainly will be in my show notes, which are also on my Ravelry page. So head on over there and join it. But I hope that you'll consider joining the knit along. And you are welcome to post on my page as well as Sam's page. And her Ravelry group is Hammy My Knitting, as just like her podcast is titled. So anyways, moving along to It's All About the Yarn. So, let's see. Last time I podcasted, I had an abundance of whips. And I have been fortunate to have some time to knit. Not as much as I would like, but that's okay. You know, life is full and it's full of good stuff. So I'm all right with that. But I've been working on a couple of projects that I have actually completed. I'm just looking here at my notes. So, without further ado, I'm going to share. So if you've been following along on my podcasts and occasionally on my Instagram, I love knitting socks. And at this point in my knitting career, so to speak, was really eager to learn how to knit 2 at a time using the magic loop method. Fortunately, I found the podcast from Mina Phillips. She is the knitting expat, and she has podcasts, but she also has tutorials. And so one of her tutorials was how to knit 2 at a time socks, and I followed along with her pattern. That is a free download on Ravelry, and I love it. I love knitting 2 at a time. I don't think that I'm necessarily saving any time in doing so, but what I'm finding is when I'm done, I have 2 socks rather than casting on another pair. So these are my socks, and I apologize, I don't have my sock blockers available, but these are the result of that first effort, and I am totally thrilled. Couldn't have really been more impressed with myself, to be honest. Does that sound silly? Probably does. I tried a new heel. This is the German short row heel. And it's certainly something that I need more work on, and I'll perfect it, I'm sure. But it was fun to try something other than the alternative or the traditional heel flap and gusset, which I don't mind. I just wanted to try something new. And I'm really excited too, because I didn't strategically plan for this, but they pretty much line up in pattern. This is a Regia sock yarn. I think it's their Polar Night colorway, or color line, I should say. I can't remember the exact color, but I believe it's in my show notes for my last episode. So yeah, I'm pretty excited, and as you'll see in my whips, it didn't take long for me to cast out another pair. So thank you, Mina. And yeah, this is exciting. The socks are going to become even more part of my life, and you'll see that momentarily. Another finished object is my Lucy cowl, and this is knit up in a Luxadorna kit. This is the DK weight yarn, and I believe it's the Artist Palette color scheme. So this was knit in the round, and then I Kitchenered the 2 ends together. So I had to do a provisional cast on and then pull the provisional out and do the Kitchener to attach both ends. It is so soft because it's cashmere, and I just really am excited about it. I don't know if I'll be keeping it or if I'll be gifting it. I think it would just look great in winter and fall with black, for example, just an all black outfit, so the colors really pop. But I'm excited about it. It was sort of the knit that I carried with me to doctor's appointments and things like that. But at one point, I just looked at it. I was like, I need to finish this. So I'm very happy with the outcome. Kitchener in the round is an experience. I have Kitchenered before. I've done it on sock toes many a time. But that was a lot of creative manipulation with multiple needles. So I believe I saved a video to my own YouTube channel that I used to learn how to do the Kitchener in the round. So if you're thinking you're going to embark on something like that, I encourage you to check out that YouTube tutorial. It was very, very helpful. So, all right. I guess it's time. Well, I could show you more whips. Yeah, I will show you some whips. I'm sorry. Some of my whips, my Find Your Fade, for example, I haven't touched since the last podcast. And the same with my Jessie's Girl Summer Tank. So I'm not going to show you those because you've already seen them. But I will show you another work in progress. And that is my Spindrift shawl. And I adore this little bag. I don't know where it came from specifically. When I participated in a fiber share exchange with Julie from Diary of a Yarn Snob, she sent it to me and said, it's been sitting in my stash. I don't really use it very often. I thought maybe you could breathe new life into it. And it's just the perfect size for this project. So I'm not sure who the creator is, but I like your work. This is my Spindrift shawl. And I started knitting this on my Knit Picks needles, my circulars, interchangeable circulars. And I found, just as I discover through the process of knitting and, you know, engaging in the actual practice, that this fiber I'm using, it's called Julie Spins. I found her on Etsy. She's out of Boston, Massachusetts. So she's here local in Mass. And this is her single ply Vera line in the colorway Zinnia. It's beautiful fiber, super soft. But knitting with this single ply, I believe it is merino, on wooden needles, just it wasn't working very well. The fiber wasn't sliding along. I kept getting caught at the joins. So I decided to order myself some new needles. And there's something that's got to be said for the beauty of Amazon Prime. I love to shop and buy local, but when I need something in the immediate, Amazon, it's here in 2 days. I come home from work and there's a package and I can start working on my projects. So I had been watching the Yarngasm podcast, Kristen of Yarngasm, who you should definitely check out. She has an episode where she talks about her Haya sharps, I believe, and those were needles that she was using for a shawl. So I thought to myself, well, I've never used Haya needles. I don't need the sharps necessarily for the size needle that I'm using to knit this. I think it's a 5 or a 6. But I want to try the Haya needles, and they are a metal, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it, needle. So much smoother. The joins are super smooth too. These aren't interchangeable, so they're a permanent join, but it just slides lovely across the needle. So I'm really glad about that. But I only ordered a 32 inch and I probably should have ordered a 36 or a 40. Not a problem. I'm almost actually done with the shawl, but as you can see, it's a little cramped right now. So lesson learned, some fibers you just need a metal, brass, whatever it might be, needle, silver plated, nickel, whatever it could be. So this is my Spindrift shawl, and this is from Helen Stewart of The Curious Handmade. I think the last time I showed this, I was just getting ready to do the lace pattern. I really love how the fiber itself is knitting up sort of the very soft colors. This is going to come with me to Europe in September when I go with my husband and my in-laws. It's just something about it when we go to Italy screams Tuscany, you know, Sorrento. So that's what I'm knitting it up for. I've learned a valuable lesson, however. When I get very eager with a project, but I'm also tired, I need to be even more diligent about following the pattern. And I have followed the pattern to date, and I thought I was following it. However, in this eyelet section, or this lace section, instead of knitting and purling and then knitting and purling each row, I was supposed to knit a couple rows on the wrong side, so there would be a little bit more of a layer between each row. I've decided at this point I'm not going to frog it. I'm not going to go back and start fresh. I'm going to take it as a reminder that I am learning. Even though I've been knitting for a number of years now, I'm still learning. I'm still perfecting my craft. And honestly, I'm not bothered by the way it's turned out. I'm going to have to block this, of course, and I still need to do the picot edge. But yeah, I think in some ways too, it's just kind of a good giggle as well. I like to knit. I like to follow the patterns. I like to make my work look like what the pattern intends. But there's been times where I've gone off on my own just because I want to go off on my own. So I think that's the beauty of knitting too. It's an art form in itself, but like any art, it's up to the creator. So this is not how the pattern was intended. This is how I accidentally made it. And this is the way I'm going to continue. And in some ways, it's very representative of the way life has been these last couple of weeks. There's been a plan, but there's been a lot of chaos too, I guess is the way to say it. So yeah, lesson learned, but still very happy with the product and going to move forward. I'm a perfectionist, and this is challenging me in a different part of my life to let go and just let it creatively flow. So yeah, but the next time I podcast, this will definitely be done, and it will be blocked and available for me to share with you. So as I promised, there's more socks. I love socks. I'm obsessed with them. So a couple podcasts ago, I shared that I had bought a sock blank from Zany Crafts on Etsy. Suzanne, who is Zany's Crafts, actually knows my aunt who's a fiber artist, and she's met my mom as well. And so I follow her on Instagram, and given the family connection, certainly adore supporting her. So I bought this sock blank, and I originally had wanted to cast on my 2 at a time socks using the sock blank, but then I thought, oh, the sock blank is so special. I want to wait until I try one pair, just a vanilla sock, on the 2 at a time before I embark on a pattern sock. So I've since cast on the pattern sock. You can see here. What's really cool is these socks aren't going to, there's sort of no chance for them to exactly match because they're from a sock blank. And there was just color variation throughout, but you can see they're certainly tonal and related to one another. These, what I did is I actually took the sock blank, let me see here if I can reach into my bag, and I put it into 2 cakes to ease with the 2 at a time sock method. But as you can see, if you look at the cakes, the colors are very similar. But as it knits, you kind of, there's that mystery, the element of surprise. The pattern that I'm knitting is called First Light, or it's actually the First Light Handcrafts line. It's their Petty Harbor sock. So I will certainly put this in my show notes. But there is just a little bit of a detailed pattern around the leg of the sock, and then after you turn the heel, the pattern just remains on the top of the sock, the top of the foot, and then the bottom of the foot becomes just traditional stockinette. In order to keep track of the repeats, because of the nature of the fiber itself and just the blending of the color, I started using these little bulb pins, which are really good as stitch markers too because they fit over many needles. But after I do a repeat, I just put a pin in that last row because I need to repeat the pattern 15 times for the length of the sock. So rather than, stressing over, did I do that right? Am I on the right row? I've sort of used this as my progress keeper along the way. I found these bulb pins. I have them actually in a couple of my own stitch markers or gifts that were given to me as stitch markers. But there's an actual marker on it as well, and that was weighing down the fiber, and because they're smaller needles, and the stitches are smaller, I didn't want to drag them out or risk ruining them. So I just ordered a whole packet of colored ones from a knitting store that also sells on Amazon. So they came in multiple colors, which is great too for other projects. So that's my newest 2 at a time sock story. They are being housed in this really cute little bag. This is from Diary of a Yarn Snob. Julie has her podcast, but she also has an Etsy store where she sells bags. And I just fell in love with this one, particularly because of all the different colors. She took strips of fabric and sewed them together. But I love the bright sort of tomato orange zipper, and then the inside also has a nice little pocket, and even the pocket is detailed. I mean, honestly, Julie, you're so cool. And she also includes her own little zipper pull, but also that could be used as a progress keeper as well. It's on one of those little lobster clasps. So yeah, I kind of felt like if I was going to embark on new socks, I needed to embark on have a new bag for them. And they kind of matched too. I unintentionally do that sometimes, but then I intentionally do that as well. Match my project bag to my actual knitting. So hopefully the next time I podcast, there's more progress on those, or perhaps they'll even be done. Though I have a lot of works in progress, so I probably need to pay attention to some others. All right. So moving along here. Let me just take a look. All right. So let's talk about acquisitions. So, funny story about being on a yarn diet. I think I may actually be better on being on a food-related diet than a yarn diet. This isn't, I'm just not successful with it. And I'm totally okay with that. Instagram, I'm telling you, it's going to be the end of my bank account. It's a good thing I have a PayPal that I use for my knitting. When I sell some of my pieces, the money goes into a PayPal account. And that's how I justify this serious addiction. So, a couple weeks ago, my husband and I went up to Salem, Massachusetts, just to kind of wander around, play tourist. We live here in New Bedford. It's a seaport community, so we thought, oh, let's go north and check out another seaport community. And truth be told, part of the journey was intended to find the local yarn store, which I did. So we wandered around the city, which it's adorable. We didn't participate in any of the museums. There's many of them related certainly to the Salem witch trials, as well as to Nathaniel Hawthorne and the House of Seven Gables. So certainly we'll go back and play even more in-depth tourist. But at this time we just kind of wandered around. We found a local brewery and a couple of cute shops, and it was a beautiful day, perfect day to be near the water and enjoy the breeze off the seafront. So the local yarn store is called Circle of Stitches, and I think it might be fairly new to the location. Again, I apologize, it's in the reverse, but I at least want you to be able to see it. Circle of Stitches carries a number of beautiful fibers, some that I can't always get at my local yarn store, and I still consider Salem kind of to be a local yarn store because it's not that far away. But while I was there, the owner had a ton of Malabrigo. And I love Malabrigo. I love indie dyers, don't get me wrong, but there's some of my sort of larger, I don't want commercial, but I don't think of them being as like commercial, but larger yarn sources. That's what I'll refer to them as. So, because I'm on my sock kick, I decided to treat myself. Maybe I should be using these for the treat yourself knit along. We'll see. But this is one of my finds, and I just love it. Isn't it gorgeous? It's like this chocolatey purple. It's actually it's their Velvet Grapes colorway, Malabrigo's sock base. Velvet Grapes. Isn't that stunning? I'm sure it would make a beautiful shawl too, but it is their superwash merino, so it will make good socks, because I believe it actually has, let me just double check. Yeah, it is intended to be their sock yarn. So I am, I'm going to knit a pair of socks with these. So that was one of my more recent acquisitions. But while I was there, I've been trying to think of what I'm going to do for my husband for Christmas. I know, it's only June, going on July, but I like to start knitting some of those projects now so that I'm not feeling the cram in October and November, and can still just enjoy knitting for the love of knitting. So while I was there, and my husband was with me, but he had no idea what I was buying. He just sat in the chair. There's a yarn store. If they have a chair or a little corner, that's where he finds himself. And he's totally comfortable with that. And I love him for the fact that he just goes along with it. So I found this. It's their Malabrigo's Rios. It's another merino superwash, but this is more of a worsted weight. It takes a size 6 to 8 needle. This color is called Tormenta, and it's just this nice blend of grays and, light, dark, kind of has that little bit of a gradient to it, and there's even a little touch of brown, as you can see. So I bought two hanks of that because I'm going to knit my husband a hat and mittens for Christmas. And the hat and mittens, I'm so excited I found them. So I think it was through watching the Grocery Girls Knit that I learned about Tin Can Knits. Tin Can Knits is another family business, and they sort of span the globe. I think they have some family here in the US or Canada, and then some in Europe. And they have a number of patterns that you can purchase, but they also have patterns that are available sort of for a beginner. And they're free. And it's not so much that they were free that I was interested in them, though that's certainly a benefit. But it's actually the style of the hat. So I'm going to be knitting what's called the barley hat. And this is a really cool hat. Let me see if you can get it close. It's got some traditional stockinette from Knitting in the Round, but it also has some garter stitch in it. So I just really thought the pattern was simple and nice, and one that I know he'll be comfortable wearing. But then they also have mittens. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. Look at these mittens. They're nice, they're simple. I'll be able to magic loop them, try them in that way, and I know that I can make them so that they'll fit his hands. So I'm really excited about embarking on both these patterns and being able to knit them up in this beautiful colorway. So those are some of my acquisitions. While we were in Salem, we also went to an antique store. Here in New Bedford, there are a number of antique stores, and my husband and I enjoy just kind of going through, wandering, finding different pieces, thinking about how we could repurpose them or reuse them in our own home. That's resulted in my husband coming home with a tricycle, which is adorable. It's actually in our garden. I put a flower pot on top of it. And a couple other pieces, but the most notable one probably is the tricycle. Oh, and our dining room set, or our kitchen table rather. We have a vintage retro 1950s, 60s kitchen dinette set that also came from that location. So we just find things, and we sort of have a tendency to go towards the older, not necessarily antiques, though I guess some of them could qualify, but we have a unique style. I guess that's the best way to say it. So anyways, sorry, that was a digression. But we went to this antique store, and this antique store had all kinds of buttons. And I thought these were just so cool. I don't know what I'm going to use them for. They might end up on a piece that I've knit, but this one to me looked like candy, almost like ribbon candy. And these, I hadn't found anything quite like them or seen anything quite like them before. So these were another acquisition, not specifically yarn, but fiber related, when we were up in Salem. So in the spirit of thinking about Christmas for my husband, I'm also going to knit him a pair of socks. See, this is why I have to start in like June and July. Through Instagram, if you're not on Instagram or don't use it too often, I encourage you to consider adding it to your repertoire if you're really into knitting and fiber, because you can find so many beautiful indie dyers and so many beautiful patterns and types of work or knitted products, finished projects, FOs, depending on who you follow. And through the world of Instagram, I came across I came across Freckled Whimsy, who I believe had a podcast, but I don't know if she's been podcasting more recently. I believe her name is Carrie, and I apologize if I'm incorrect on that. But anyways, Freckled Whimsy, if I understand the storyline from Instagram correctly, has a friend who had a dog that they rescued. And unfortunately, that dog had been ill. He's since passed away. He's crossed the Rainbow Bridge. But to help raise funds for the shelter that he came from, they teamed up as friends, and they came up with a colorway for him. The dog's name was Kevin, and our pug, Watson, is a rescue. And so when I saw that the money from the purchase of the yarn went to a rescue, I just knew that I needed to buy it. I needed to support that initiative. And I knew that the colorway would be one that my husband would really enjoy having socks in. He has all kinds of crazy socks, and I'm going to start really feeding that inclination of his. So this is my purchase in support of Kevin. Rest in peace, little Kevin. Dyed up by Freckled Whimsy. It's called They're Just Kevin. It was available with a solid base for a toe and heel if you wanted to do multicolored socks. This is self-striping. It's an 8 stripe repeat, so I just went with this. It's a 2-ply fingering, 80/20, superwash merino and nylon, 400 yards, 100 grams. I can't wait to knit this up. One, because I think the colors are just magnificent, and I know that my husband will like it, but two, I just love that the funds went towards a cause that is something that's both near and dear to our hearts. So stay tuned. These are going to become a pair of socks for Robert. And the great part is he'll never watch these podcasts. He listens to me talk all the time as it is, so I can share these with you and he won't know. I can't post them on Instagram or anything because he'll follow me there. But last in the form of acquisitions is one that came from my mom, actually. And it was one I think that she just happened across in her own journeys through the knitting world. And it's definitely a German, from what I can understand on the label. It is a sock weight wool. It's a virgin wool and polyamide blend. So 75 virgin wool, 25 polyamide. And it's super wash. So it can go in the wash. The colorway looks like it's named is Partie. But it is made in Germany. So I apologize. I don't have any German in me whatsoever. I do as far as heredity, but not ability to speak the language. So anyways, this is another colorway that came into my stash. It's a nice sort of fall scheme. It's got like a raspberry and a gold and a green. The camera's not quite catching the vibrancy of the yarn, but more socks to be made out of this beauty. So thanks, Mom. All right, I think that does it for acquisitions. Moving right along, so we've kind of covered it's all about the yarn. Moving along, I want to share with you some things from my closet, otherwise known as Katie's Closet. This segment is one where I share with you pieces that have been knit by myself or have been knit by others or crocheted by others for me, that I treasure and are part of my wardrobe. Those who know me know that I am comfortable sort of having a unique style, professional style, because of the line of work that I'm in, but I will incorporate knitwear into that without pause rather. So one of the items I want to share with you is the pattern's called Wingspan, and I apologize, I can't remember the artist's name. Oh, I feel terribly. I'll post it in my show notes. But this pattern, when I started knitting again, is one that my local yarn store recommended. My mom jumped on board and she started knitting it as well. This is knit up in a Barocco. I think it's their Boboli lace. It's been a number of years, so I'm not sure. You might still be able to find it depending on where you look for your yarn. But this colorway is Poppy Seed. And Wingspan is truly a wingspan, so to speak. It was my first venture into short rows. And it makes this lovely wrap that you can, with a shawl pin, for example, pin back. You can let it flap over. There's just lots of styles. It's very versatile. But the Boboli lace has this sort of fun variation in the color. And as I mentioned, it was my first venture into short rows, which I have to admit, short rows don't bother me. Some people aren't fans of them. I had to use the short rows when I knit the heels, the German short row heel on my 2 at a time socks. Not a problem. So I think I'm going to try to find some more patterns with short rows just to kind of keep my skills up. But as you can see, it was just sort of a simple edging that was knit in at the time of the pattern. It wasn't as though you had to pick up stitches and cast that on afterwards. And it's just a series of asymmetrical triangles that are essentially attached to each other through the short row process. What's fun is, depending on the yarn that you use, you could end up with, distinct lines that designate each triangle. You could actually, if you wanted to, do multiple colors and do each triangle as a particular color. So lots of options, lots of variation, but it is a piece that I wear and probably should wear more often because it is warm. It does cover a significant part of your shoulders and your back. And with a nice shawl pin, looks really lovely. And it's, again, versatile. You could wear it over a blazer, you could wear it just over a sweater, a cotton top, etc. So that's one item from my closet. Another item, hold on a moment, that's in my closet is this shawl. And this is one that my mom knit up. So I will ask her for the pattern information. This pretty much goes my wingspan too. Ooh, okay. This actually, if I remember correctly, the fiber itself is one that she got from Michael's. It's just a pure virgin wool. And the reason she got it was that it was this color. It was this neutral color. And then we experimented with dyeing yarn with Kool-Aid in a crock pot. And this was the outcome of the hank that my mom dyed. The spacing is perfect. That was totally unintentional. But it was just sort of something fun that we did. Certainly we would actually love to become more proficient at dyeing and the dyeing process and using acid dyes and everything. But for a little giggle out of a crock pot, not so bad at all. And this shawl is, again, one that has some versatility because you could wear it this way if you wanted to. You know, this way, just a traditional shawl, for example. So it's a fun one to wear, especially because people, you'll ask about it. They're like, oh, the colors are so different. They're so pretty. Where'd you get that? We dyed it in a crock pot. I mean, really, talk about a conversation starter. So that's another item that's in my closet that I adore. And lastly, from my closet, and again, I will put the patterns up in my show notes because I don't recall the pattern for that second shawl because it was a knit gift to me. The last item here is this little bag that my mom knit up out of cotton yarn. And then she went in and she embellished it with these beads. This weekend, so Saturday, I had the honor of being in a dear friend's wedding. I was one of her bridesmaids. And the color of our dress was a light blush color. If you head over to my Instagram, I'm MissKnitSea on Instagram. You'll see a bunch of pictures, a bunch of candids really from the wedding. But you'll see that the dress was just a lighter shade of this blush, and this was sort of the perfect addition. It let me keep some of my personal items with me to the church and then to the reception. So it is a beautiful knit pattern in a cotton yarn, and then the inside, my mother just lined it with some fabric. And the fabric actually has a little bit of a shimmer on it that you can, if you're up close, can kind of see through the knitwork itself. So I just love that I have this adorable little bag now, and it's one certainly that I'll use because I found it very helpful for that event, but I think it'll probably come on the cruise with me as well, so I have a little evening bag to enjoy as well. So thanks, Mom, for the contributions to my closets. I actually joke that I should probably call that segment Made by Mary instead of Katie's Closet because my mom knits a lot of my stuff. She enjoys it, and I love wearing it, so it's really a perfect match. So that's it for what's in my closet this week, but now I'm going to move along to local love. So for those of you who are joining for the first time, I like to share with the knitting community those items that I found that are local to me here in New Bedford, in the greater South Coast of Massachusetts, but also New England. If you're not familiar with Massachusetts or New England, you can get there from here, so to speak. It's on the map. If you look at a map of the U.S., we're tiny, we're small. So you can get across state lines quite easily and travel the region. So I consider it sort of all local to me. One of the items, and I apologize, I have a tendency when I get new yarn to just cake it right up, and I think part of it's for storage purposes. So these are already caked. You're not going to be able to see them in hank form, but I think you'll still be able to appreciate the beauty of them. The first is this beautiful natural wool. It's not treated outside of the fact that it's been processed for color, and the color I believe is called lawn. This is from Doc Mason's wool. Doc Mason's is not only local in New Hampshire, but it's actually local to where I grew up. The small town I grew up in, just in the Southern Lakes region. But the Mason family is one that I actually used to babysit for when I was much younger. And their children were actually in my mom's class before she retired, when she was still teaching. They have a number of sheep that are part of a rehabilitation, as part of a veterinary practice. And the sheep, the fleece from that sheep is then sent to a mill, I believe, on Prince Edward Island, and then dyed, and then comes back for sale. So if you are in the local Massachusetts region, or if you're traveling and you happen to be in Boston, Boston has what's called a section called Haymarket, but they've built the Boston Public Market, which is full of amazing foods and beverages and local wares. And it's called New England Farm to Fiber. And you can actually purchase this wool through the New England Farm to Fiber stall in Haymarket. But Ellen also has it available online through Etsy. So I'll put that information in my show notes. But the Farm to Fiber initiative is really wonderful because it's local fiber from all across New England. And I believe the brains behind that endeavor is also involved or may own what's called JP Knit and Stitch in Jamaica Plain here in Massachusetts. I've yet to visit JP Knit and Stitch in person. It's on my my local yarn store tour, so to speak. But just a fabulous collaboration amongst a wonderful group of people who are interested in the fiber community and dedicated to it. But this itself came from the Mason family. Ellen in particular is sort of the brains behind this. So this is one of my local loves with some strong family ties or connections as well. Another is a fiberway or a farm, I apologize, that I became familiar with through attending a fiber festival at Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, back in, I think, February or March with my mother. I came across this colorway, and you can only imagine how amazing it looked when it was in hank form. This is from Romney Ridge Yarns and Wool. It's called their Down East Wool yarn. It's a worsted weight. I'm just not sure what it's going to become because I just love the colors so much. I was thinking maybe mittens or a hat. It's softer than the Doc Masons because, again, that's a real natural yarn. And this reminds me of what you knit a cardigan in, and you sit by a toasty fire with slippers and flannel pajamas. It's a little bit harsher on the skin, but the warmth is tremendous. This is a bit softer, but still sort of has that natural feel to it a bit. And I adore that. Some yarns I want soft because they're going to be real close to me. Some of them I want bigger and bulkier and warmer and just like I'm cuddling with the lamb itself. So this Romney Ridge, this is one of their colorways. If I remember correctly, it's mulberry. So this is their tag. This is just one of their fibers that they have. They have multiple different weights, different colorways. Very active in the local fiber community, so certainly check them out. Again, I'll put it in my show notes, but this is I just loved it, and I had to have it, and it's in my stash, and eventually it'll have a more permanent home in some creation, but for right now, that's where it's at. I'm going to shift gears a little bit from yarn, but still keeping it local. If you have not or are not familiar with Anne Hood, who is a local Rhode Island author, I encourage you to pick up her books. These two were gifted to me by my aunt. Anne has written many other books as well, but these two came to me from my aunt. My aunt had a chance to meet her in person out in Western New York. Anne was doing a book tour, and I think she may have been participating in some sort of fiber-related event. The first one is called Knitting Yarns. And this is a collection of essays that talk about life and the role that knitting and yarn and fiber arts has in different individuals' lives and how they've come to use that as sort of a therapy or understanding a purpose. So there's authors like Barbara Kingsolver that writes in here, along with many, many others. So I encourage you to pick it up. What's nice is it can be a quick read because it is broken down into each each author's sort of experience rather than being one thorough, one cover to cover book, so to speak. So you can, read a chapter, put it down, read a chapter, put it down. What's really special though is that when my aunt met Anne, she got it autographed. So these will certainly be books that I will cherish. because not only is there that book, but there's this one, The Knitting Circle. Anne's book, and I don't want to, this is not a spoiler alert, but Anne had a significant life trauma that would have left anybody devastated, and certainly I can appreciate where she comes from. She explores knitting as a path to healing, and it's a really profound novel, one that I can certainly relate to, not having had the same experience, but something certainly very similar. So I would encourage you to pick up the book. And again, this one's autographed as well. I don't know if you can see it. The lighting is starting to change as the sun shifts around my house. So those are two books that I highly recommend. You won't want to put them down, and they are also from a local here in Providence, Rhode Island. So happy to share those. And the last local love I have is a bit of a stretch as far as it being a local, but I just have to share them. So as I mentioned throughout, I think, all of my podcasts, I am very fortunate to have a very talented mother when it comes to needle crafts. But I also have an aunt, my mom's sister, who is a fiber artist. And my mom's birthday was at the beginning of June, so my aunt sent her a series of her own yarn, hand-dyed yarn, and I stole them from my mom, not to knit with them. I will give them back, I promise. But I wanted to be able to show them here on the podcast. So each of these are my aunt's 100% superwash merino 4-ply. They're about 430 yards, 100 grams. So beautiful shawl material. The first one here is it's the Carib Light. I don't want to take the band off because they're not my yarns. But I hope you can see just how pretty and subtle those colors are. It truly does look like the Caribbean. And that's my aunt's label. She is dying. I don't know that she's done any events recently because my cousin's getting married next week, her daughter. So I think she's been a little preoccupied with the wedding, particularly because she actually made my cousin's wedding dress. Just, again, I'm so blessed to come from such talent, and I only hope to someday achieve the most basic of it. But this is another colorway. This one's called Party. Isn't that fun? It just reminds me of like a raspberry and blueberry and cherry cobbler. Isn't that pretty? And then the last one is called Boston Cooler. And it's just this real sort of subtle neutral colorway. And it in some ways reminds me of the ocean. The different colors of the sand and the blue of the water. But together, I said to my mom, I said, what are you going to make with these? And she was like, I don't know, but I think they might make a fade. I think my mom is going to jump on the fade bandwagon and make something with these. And if she doesn't, I will. So that's another local love that's near and dear to my heart. But certainly, if you're interested in learning more about my aunt's yarn, you can contact me directly through Ravelry, and I will get you connected with her. So that you can figure out opportunities that might be available. Which reminds me, if you are a maker, whether it be of bags or yarn or fiber related items, I would certainly be interested in being able to share your items on my podcast and give them away as gifts. Again, we've got the knit along coming up, or give them along as prizes, I should say. We've got the knit along coming up. And I'm anticipating that I'm going to host a solo knit along myself eventually soon as well. So if you're interested, please just contact me directly through Ravelry, and we'll go from there. But at this point in the podcast, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Sorry, I'm just looking at all my yarn, and the wheels are spinning as to all these amazing projects that I have to get ready on the needles. So I appreciate your joining me. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to connecting with you through Ravelry and Instagram. And please do consider joining that knit along. It's really going to be fun. It's just going to be an opportunity to really knit something for yourself. And who doesn't love a good selfish knit? So until next time, enjoy your knitting. Be sure to be smitten with it. And I will hopefully be seeing you very soon. Thanks so much. Take care.